Om Shanti, warm welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. And as always, it's nice to start with a reflection. So I invite you to be seated comfortably, if not already doing so. And with just one thought, I bring my attention into the present moment. And in bringing my focus here and now, I'm aware of where my focus often is during the day, how much my mind is racing through the day, jumping one thought to the next, and so focused on the outer world, almost as if my mind is constantly seeking something, wanting something. What does my mind seek? And perhaps for every soul, very simply, peace. I look for peace in scenes, situations, interactions, desiring certain outcomes as if they hold the key to my peace. But sitting here now, quietly, completely in the moment, I entertain the possibility that what I seek might be inside of me, not outside in the physical world. Perhaps the peace and contentment I seek can only be found through an inner journey, a journey that takes me into silence or a spiritual space. Peace is not physical. It's invisible, non-physical, but very real. And it will require going into spiritual realms to be experienced. Om Shanti.
Good evening. Welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. So tonight's topic is silence and contentment. And so, for those of you who have taken the course before, and even if you have not, this topic of silence is a really interesting topic. I think that one hears the word silence, there's all sorts of perceptions, experiences of what silence is. And so, when you came into this study, what were your ideas of silence? I don't even know if you remember. And um, did you find there was a realignment, having to re-understand what silence is?
Hmm. Can't say I necessarily recollect, but I feel there might have always been a feeling that it wasn't a physical silence I was seeking. We actually was raised in quite a noisy household. There was music all the time and different kinds of music playing simultaneously. So it was quite a cacophony, as well as a very active um, life. So I think I did, though, experience, I feel we all do, moments that I can only describe by flow, or some call being in your zone, where it just feels like everything lines up and it seems effortless, even though you're doing something or something's going on, but there was an effortlessness. And for some reason, that felt like a silence to me, where there isn't that laboring or that sense of, and it doesn't mean you don't have great endeavors going on. It was just, yeah, as if the planets line up and this flow or ease, and always there be efficiency as well. Um, I feel that now, even now as we sit here, there's a lot of equipment and technology, and it was all meant to make our lives easier. But it's not the kind of ease that I think we experience when we're in that zone. So it's a very inner thing, which makes it so mysterious. I think for many it feels like hit and miss. If we're lucky, we'll feel it, but I don't think the outer comforts will create it. Sometimes I think we think it will. But it's, yeah, this feeling of just being aligned or in a flow, and that always felt silent to me.
So, why do you feel, have you noticed with the students who've taken the course, or maybe not even, because I know silence is actually something um, you really love, I would say, is a big speciality for yourself. Why is there sometimes a pretty negative connotation to silence? Maybe not even necessarily in a spiritual context, so to speak. And maybe souls don't even ever think about that, but
Sometimes I'm more of a baker, I'll be honest with you, but every once in a while I try and cook something. And in my mind, this should work out well. So I'm not a real follower of a written recipe, but in my mind, this should work out well. So I start putting the ingredients in, and in my mind, I'm creating a really delicious dish. And all the ingredients go in, and I cook the dish, and then I go to eat it, and it's like, it's not matching what I thought was. And so I feel that sometimes we just don't know the ingredients that go into silence, and so we're always, expecting it to be a certain experience, and we start doing things that we think will lead to that experience, and it's just not the right ingredients. I think it's a great disappointment. Um, but we have such expectations that if I, go into a quiet space and I turn off all the music and I, and we want to have an experience of what we call liberation or well being. That's what we want to have. And we think that, again, that it's external. That's a huge part of the recipe souls are working with, has something to do with shutting things off in the external world. We even talk about Raj Yoga's mastery of the physical senses. And yet people still sit and close their eyes and, in essence, close their ears, try to shut out all the music. These ingredients that they think has something to do with silence, and doesn't really have much to do with it at all. It does create quiet, but really, yeah, looking deeply at what that silence is. The best I can think of it is as a spiritual state, which would assume that we understand how to access a spiritual state. What we're trying to do is alter the physical state. And so that's not the entry point to a spiritual state.
It's interesting you're talking about shutting things down on an external level. Do you feel that that could possibly be a reason why there's some actually afraid of silence?
Yeah, what was I listening to? I'm trying to. Oh, yeah, it was just earlier this evening, and this idea of we didn't want to be alone with our mind because of the waste and rubbish in it, and so again, this faith I have in the human spirit that we actually have multiple levels, layers that we can operate at. And we've just become accustomed to operating at the surface. And so when we go into so called silence or solitude, introvert, we're just hearing the surface noise, and that really frightens us. When I would go swimming in the pool, and I have to be aware, otherwise, I would just eject, much like many eject out of meditation. I'd have to be aware, okay, the first lap or two, the first few minutes, it's going to be a little anxious because of certain thoughts and feelings. But I knew deeper down inside, I loved being in that medium, the water. It felt so gentle. But at first, there'd be, for whatever reason, maybe past birth, I don't know, drowning or whatever. But at first, there'd be some anxiety. And I knew that was going to happen. And to not be afraid, to not abort, to just continue with that faith, understanding it's going to happen, and then you will pass through it. It's like breaking through a kind of surface level. And eventually I would get into that beautiful space, a deeper space. So on the surface, yes, we've got a lot of rubbish. But as spiritual beings, we also have some very beautiful things underneath that. And if we can kind of be patient and stick with it, I think that there won't be that fear of the noise, the ugliness all here in the silence. There's actually some very beautiful things that I get to experience in silence.
So it's interesting you were sharing about the flow that you were experiencing, that's quite opposite from what some might feel what silence feels like. And even sometimes I hear and they're like, okay, there's a silence, awkward. It's as if there's, and it feels like that's a completely different realm, but it is very much connected, it feels. And connected when you were talking about feeling that flow, and which is actually the topic of tonight's uh, session, which is what is this relationship between silence and contentment? What do you feel that is contentment? That's another loaded one. Because I remember even growing up, and I remember sharing, I'd love to come to a time in my life, a place in my life where I feel absolutely content. And some would say, you mean you just want to settle? So it's quite, I never realized that there's that loaded term there. But contentment and silence.
Mm.
What is contentment?
I really actually like this combination. You used the word connect just now a few times leading up to your question. Contentment itself, in English, anyways, and I know when you look at Hindu mythology, Santoshima is shown with her bowl of rice. Um, it's got content in it. So contents, it sounds like there's a fullness there. The way we sometimes describe it as a freedom from desire, which I think is why people say you're just going to settle, because we have a very skewed concept of what freedom from desire means. My understanding of freedom from desire is that if I eat a big meal and I'm completely full, and someone comes up to me with a really tasty dish, and I will say, no, thank you, I'm full. I have no desire because I'm full, not because I'm in denial or
Suppressing yourself.
asceticism or, kind of horrible things, but it's just because I'm full. This is so content means that there's a fullness, Santoshima with her bowl of rice, her comfort food. Um, and so the beautiful connection to silence and the word connect, what I'm trying to do in silence is connect to sources of fulfillment. These again are spiritual. And so we know of people who have so much stuff in their life and they still want things.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not content. They have a lot of stuff, but it's not fulfilling at a spiritual level. And the place you shop for spiritual things is silence. So to think silence is empty or silence is filled with rubbish, frightening things, neither of these actually I would attach the word silence to. Silence is full, 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 full of spiritual, it's very rich with spiritual nutrients. So there's a deep connection between contentment and silence, and they work off each other. I go into silence to become full, and because I'm full, I don't, I experience that freedom from waste and desire. So I think there's just such misconceptions around the word, but this experience, I think souls are quite familiar with wanting that. And that, yeah, we do seek fulfillment through, it's so odd, through physical things. I mean, when you say it out loud, it just sounds crazy, actually. But, a car would make me happy. So, what does that mean? Souls who don't have a certain car aren't happy? Like, what does that all mean? And so, to really, happiness, like, it's not even a physical entity. Um, so to really understand these are spiritual concepts we're dealing with. And I want to be, I, the soul, want such a sense of fullness or well being, freedom from desire. And that means I need to connect to a source of spiritual fulfillment.
Mm-hmm. So, this next question might be a little sensitive to viewers. I guess it depends on what you think. Many seek silence in nature.
Yeah.
So, and they do find it very fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for someone to bridge that gap in terms of how is silence possible whahout having to find it in nature, and this common question isn't at all to devalue those experiences in nature, but it does become quite an interesting experience in the world where some can have a very different experience of what nature is in different parts of the world.
Mm.
And so, silence in nature, do you feel that that's a different kind of experience?
I really do understand why we would have that experience in nature. I mean, of course, if I look at a beautiful outdoor scene in the mountains and a concrete jungle, something is different there. And actually, what it is a vibration. nature is far more untouched and pure and pristine. Concrete jungle, we've gone in there and put our vibration in there. So it's actually the vibration that souls, the way that matter is less um, sort of interfered with in nature. It's more pure, so that they both are elements. They both are made of the five elements, as we say. You know, the concrete jungle and nature, they both are made of the same materials. But in one, the elements are left in such a pure way, so they have a certain vibration. And I think we're really enjoying that pure vibration, which again we can get through silence as well. Whereas when I'm in that concrete jungle, matter has been used in a very different way and filled with a different vibration. And I think it's really the vibration that we are being influenced by, the difference. There was, I think we've mentioned it before, but there was because some architects understand this and they actually try to design with minimal distortion of matter. And so it creates a different vibration. And so souls come into that space and they feel differently, so then they contribute to the vibration. And there was an architect who originally was a religious leader, and he went into architecture and he specifically wanted to construct spaces that enable souls to connect with their original nature of peace, which I found really interesting. Yeah, so it's about, again, connecting. Architecturally, I find silence the most beautiful context to connect with that pure vibration of the self. But I do understand why the elements in that state in nature create that feeling for us, because they're still so pristine.
But that's really, really helpful for souls to actually recognize what exactly the issue is. Um, more to understand, and perhaps maybe more to be able to empower themselves, because they might not recognize that there is something much more invisible, and it might feel like it's actually nature versus, tall skyscrapers and structures, but not feeling there's something underneath all that we can feel but not be able to articulate.
I mean, what we try to do in our meditation spaces is create a vibration. It's not in the mountains, but we try to create a vibration that is as nurturing as if I was out in nature.
So now, in relationship to Raja Yoga, what is the connection between considering myself to be a soul and accessing silence, and that connection between considering myself to be soul and contentment?
I think, again, because what we are seeking is spiritual fulfillment, the entry point is going to be spirituality, a spiritual awareness. So that actually helps me to enter the world that will really feed me, is considering myself to be a soul. And, again, to me, a big part of silence is it is free from a certain kind of noise. It's free from noise of the temporal. So to consider myself to be a soul is to go into my eternal spiritual identity. And these are the hallmark qualities of the type of silence we're talking about. Is it's spiritual and it's eternal. There is not the noise of the temporal. So considering myself to be a soul is really the entry point to that world of silence, of spirituality.
It feels like then that what happens for someone who feels like it's impossible for them to feel what silence feels like.
Again, I have faith in the human spirit, and I think sometimes the only thing we suffer from is a lack of patience,
Mhm.
right? And huge expectations on the self. We really put a lot of expectations on the self as to what's going to happen. And so I think, just to be patient with the self. And I always start with sort of the question, okay, you may not be feeling any of this. This might just be words, but to just start with the thought or the question, do you have the faith that you are a soul? I mean, this whole exercise is useless if you don't even believe that it's an experience worth pursuing. So, do you have the faith that you are a soul? And it's almost as if we have to go through a bit of a thought process sometimes to arrive at that and think, okay, let's say I'm not a soul. Let's say I'm the body, and just kind of think through what that implies about myself and others if I'm saying I am the body. I remember being in university and having a conversation with a fellow student who really had the vision of being a mom. And we were, in our early 20s at the time. And she really saw in her future that she just wanted to be a mom. I think she was in university because she was very smart and, but ultimately I felt that she saw herself as that was the profession that she really envisioned, was to be a mother. And I don't even know why we had this conversation, but she was in organic biology, I believe, one of the sciences, and I was in psychology. And we somehow were talking about just human beings at the most basic level. And her feeling was we are chemical reactions and we are, physiological. And I was kind of stunned because we were actually quite close. I was like, I'm sorry. I said, really? Like, what about thoughts? And oh, yeah, all synapses firing. I said, so when you become a mother, is that how you're going to look at your child? It's just a bunch of chemical reactions, and of course, there was no response for that. So we have to be very careful when we ask ourselves the question, do I think I am a body? Or do I think I am more than that, a soul? There's implications to what I believe. If I think I'm the body, it means everybody else is a body. Everybody else is their gender and their language and the color of their skin. And really have to think carefully. I can't be selective. On this day, I think it'll work for me to be the body. And on this day, I'm going to be very righteous. No, we're more than just our bodies or the color of our skin. So we have to be quite honest and clear. Which one do I believe? And of course, the most obvious, if I think I'm the body, I will die. So once I've figured that piece out, answered that question for myself, which one do I think I am? If I am convinced I am a soul, then it's just a matter of patiently sitting, honestly sitting with that thought until I start to feel it, as if the numbness wears off of basically for so long thinking I'm the body. Right? That just has to wear off. And the moment I believe, I admit it to myself, I believe I am a soul. And it's just slowly working through all the resistance to feeling that.
So it seems like we're in this, I would call it an integrative dilemma.
Mm,
You know, that
that
we,
sounds exciting.
we are very discontent,
ID. Mm,
very discontent,
mm,
and yet we walk around feeling there must be more, there must be more,
mm-hmm,
and so it's quite interesting what that soul had said, that we're just all chemical reactions and synapses,
mm,
because maybe we don't necessarily think about it that way, but in terms of the things that we find that matter, it seems
mm-hmm,
quite deeply embedded into our sense of identity. And so, would you feel that it can be quite easy to sort of not see the connection between thinking that I'm this physical matter? Because I don't think anybody walks around saying, I'm a body, I'm a body, I'm a body, but feeling discontent and not really seeing why.
mm-hmm. Yeah, what we suffer from is deep habits that block really doing anything sensible is what we suffer from. Because what we've got going on is that I'm walking through the physical world. And there are reasons it happened, but I am taking from the physical world, which wasn't always how we operated, but now it's a deep habit. And even though it's not even working for me anymore, it doesn't even make sense anymore, the habit is deep. We say attachment to that habit is really deep. So now I am in a bit of a dilemma in that I'm not even interested in doing what I'm doing anymore, but I can't seem to stop. And where will I get the power to do something basically sensible, to override that habit and admit, which is pretty obvious, that I'm hungry for things that are not physical. I think many arrive at that place, but I can't seem to stop taking from the physical. So it puts us in a bit of an odd situation. Yeah, we have deep, deep attachments or habits. And, I compare it to an alcoholic trying to be sober in a bar. That we are in the physical realm, and it's not about going into a cave. That's not a life. I want to be in the physical realm and interact with it in a really healthy way, because it's quite a wonder to act and interact, but just not take my sense of fulfillment from the physical world to actually access my inner wealth and actually live off of that rather than anything external.
It's interesting. You bring it full circle back when you talk about not being in a cave
Mm-hmm.
because of these ideas of silence,
Mm-hmm.
of shutting things down, running away.
Mm-hmm.
And so perhaps a part of it too is some find that it can also be an intellectual struggle of what is that experience of being a soul? What is the nature of being a soul?
Mm-hmm.
Especially with respect to when you were sharing that, yes, it was an experience you were having before you came into the study, but that flow, that
Mm-hmm.
feeling of that flow, that perhaps maybe you didn't have the words for it, but the nature of a soul.
Mm-hmm. I think that sometimes the only thing that's really stopping us, and it could come in many different ways, I don't have time, or becoming intellectual about it, which is also another obstacle to experiencing it, is fear. And, so there has to be a readiness, if you will, in the soul, because it's actually a very simple thing. I mean, it doesn't require any intellectual cleverness whatsoever. In fact, that's often an obstacle. And many of the original students were, as we say, uneducated, so they were at an advantage. That I'm trying to let go of a lot of things to have that experience. And again, we're in that dilemma of I'm attached to these things that I want to let go of to have the experience, but I'm really attached. And it's kind of a messy, difficult situation. So, one of the key things that we saw happening um, at the beginning for many of the students, and you might experience too, was disinterest. That is our ally. And disinterest does not mean I don't care. Disinterest means that I am now gathering enough initial power to override the habits.
But I guess you would have to be disinterested in that
Yeah,
force that way.
yeah. It's actually because I care a great deal that I'm doing it. So, yeah, and so it's everyone's timing is different. You can't force someone to be soul conscious, they have to be ready to embark on that.
Tired of being something they're not, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's as if one is really having to do like a complete 180 degree in terms of
Mm-hmm.
what it means to be full.
Yeah.
of what is inside of me, because we grow up feeling, and maybe not even just growing up, but just on a subconscious level, you constantly feel like you have to prove yourself. You have to accumulate things, and it might not even necessarily be things. I mean, how many more degrees I need behind my
Hmm.
name, or and perhaps maybe what is really important right now is for us to have an experience.
Yeah, when you
Mm-hmm.
start to get into the subtle aspects of contentment, it gets quite interesting. It's easy to, okay, I've got rid of stuff. But when you start to get into, status, recognition,
Image.
approval, the deepest form of contentment is self respect, which is soul consciousness, to really experience as a soul the value of the self, and the values in the self. So I think that's the end all be all. A
Mm-hmm.
soul who has that self respect really has the greatest wealth. We call it purity. But yeah, it gets quite subtle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only possible to navigate through those subtleties in a soul conscious awareness. I can't intellectually get through it, certainly can't physically or scientifically get through it. The only way I'll be sensitive to that kind of journey is in soul consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
at least honest enough in that journey. So,
Well, thank you. This is a beautiful topic, and perhaps many find silence to be this state that they can't reach, right?
mm,
Um, and that it seems like, yes, we talk about it so much, but faith that I am a soul is such a powerful and important step in that direction. And so perhaps maybe we will go into an experience.
mm. What every soul seeks is peace, as if peace is the most valuable resource on the planet. And yes, we might seek it outside in nature or just in outcomes that we desire. But true peace, a peace that is independent of anything outside, is within every soul. It's not an empty experience. This true peace is very rich with everything that feeds the soul: purity, lightness, forgiveness. The doorway to true peace is to focus on what is eternal, not physical, as if there is some memory inside of the self that transcends time. Everything is there, complete faith in the self, and taking time over and over every day to go beyond ordinary thought, day to day thoughts, to go inside, deep inside, and start to awaken that ancient memory of who I am. It's probably the greatest act of self care very patient, remembering I am a soul. There might be just a microsecond of tasting that experience, a flash of knowing true peace. And in that brief moment, I am free beyond any desires, experiencing the single thing I was seeking, the peace of the self, my eternal nature of peace. Om Shanti. I am a peaceful soul.
Thank you. Well, that marks the end. Tonight's session just seems to fly by so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So, a warm appreciation for those who've joined us. And always know that if you have any questions or topics in the future, you can always type it into the chat box. We are keeping an eye out and also checking the email. So if you have questions, topics, you can send those to us. And we're happy to address them during these sessions. And I'll let Judy share about what sessions are coming up for this weekend, perhaps maybe to remind souls that the interview, the Raj Yogi,
Mm-hmm.
is also happening on Thursdays, and it's a little bit of a different topic that we discuss, or trend that we discuss on the Thursdays. So I'll pass this over to Judy while I put on the IT hat. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Nora. So, yes, Thursday evenings, our lineup is 6:45 to 7:30 experience, which is a drop-in meditation experience. And then same time, 7:35 to 8:15 interview format, but exploring quite deliberately um, Raj Yoga and how it applies to you. So, going into the basic topics of Raj Yoga, which tend to be the soul, supreme soul, and understanding spiritual laws, and how that's going to apply to my own practice and to my day to day life, integrating into life. So, quite specific. So, it will give you a good exposure to Raj Yoga as well if you have not taken the course. So, you're most welcome to join. Please check our website if seeking our full lineup of offerings. We try to keep that up to date. But thank you for joining tonight. And until we meet again, Om Shanti.